What if the buildings we trust most were ticking time bombs? From luxury towers that shattered under sunlight to entire bridges and skyscrapers collapsing without warning, these aren't scenes from a disaster movie. They really happened. And they reveal the dark side of architecture's biggest mistakes. This isn't just about concrete and steel, it's about lives lost, warnings ignored, and how ambition can turn deadly. Stay with us, because these shocking real-life collapses will change the way you see the world around you. It was sleek, modern, and hailed as a triumph of engineering, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, stretching across Washington's Puget Sound. Nicknamed Galloping Gertie for its unusual bounce, the suspension bridge opened in 1940 with high hopes. Designed to be efficient and cost-effective, it was a symbol of progress. But just 4 months later, it would become something else entirely, a legend of failure. On November 7, 1940, strong winds swept across the Sound, just 40 miles per hour. Nothing extreme. But for Gertie, it was too much. The bridge didn't just sway, it twisted, rolled, and rippled like a ribbon caught in the wind. Cars tried to cross as the deck heaved beneath them. The entire structure buckled in rhythm, as if it were alive. Then, with a violent shudder, the bridge tore itself apart and plunged into the icy water below. The world watched in disbelief. The collapse wasn't caused by a storm or earthquake, it was aerodynamics. The design, though elegant, was too lightweight. Engineers had focused on sleek efficiency but hadn't accounted for how wind would interact with the long, flat deck. There were no dampers, no wind deflectors, no way to control the rising oscillations that tore the bridge apart from within. But from this failure came progress. The disaster triggered a revolution in bridge engineering. Researchers studied wind dynamics like never before. Future suspension bridges were built with aerodynamic awareness at their core, wider decks, wind tunnels, stabilizing systems, and safety margins that didn't exist before. Galloping Gertie may have fallen, but her collapse reshaped the way we build. Because sometimes, it takes a disaster to teach us how to truly defy the forces of nature. It's one of the most iconic structures in the world, but also one of the biggest architectural blunders in history. The Leaning Tower of Pisa wasn't meant to lean. At first glance, it looks like a perfectly designed monument, a proud bell tower rising beside the Pisa Cathedral. But then you notice it, tilted, awkward, almost like it's mid-fall, frozen in time. And that famous tilt? It all started with a simple mistake. Construction began in 1173, with no warning signs of disaster. But by the time workers reached the third floor, something strange happened. The ground beneath the tower, soft and unstable, started to shift. The foundation, just 3 meters deep, was far too shallow for such a heavy structure. Slowly, the tower began to lean, and there was no turning back. Then, something unexpected, construction stopped. For nearly 100 years, due to war and political chaos, the site was abandoned. It should have been the tower's end. But instead, the long pause allowed the ground to settle. Ironically, that delay may have saved it from collapsing altogether. When work resumed, the lean had become impossible to ignore. Yet, they kept building. By 1372, the tower was finally complete, with a permanent tilt that only grew more severe over time. Engineers tried everything over the centuries to keep it upright, but nothing seemed to work, until a major restoration began in 1993. This time, they didn't just patch it up, they stabilized the entire structure. By 2001, the lean had been reduced, and the tower finally stood on firmer ground. But here's where things take a darker turn. Not long ago in China, a beautifully designed scenic archway suddenly collapsed. It wasn't meant to be climbed, but people did it anyway. That day, the structure gave way, sending over 100 people plunging down in a terrifying moment of chaos. The full scope of the disaster is still unknown. But the warning is clear: even the most peaceful-looking structures can turn deadly when their limits are ignored. What do you think? Are we still making the same mistakes we did centuries ago? Let us know. It was meant to be a night of music, laughter, and celebration. But on July 17, 1981, inside the gleaming Hyatt Regency Hotel in Kansas City, joy turned into horror in a matter of seconds. The hotel's stunning atrium, with its glass ceilings and hanging walkways, was the pride of the building. The suspended bridges connected the second and fourth floors, hovering above a grand lobby filled with hundreds of guests enjoying a Friday night dance. Then, without warning, the unthinkable happened. Both walkways suddenly broke loose and crashed onto the crowd below. In an instant, metal and concrete rained down. The music stopped. Screams echoed. Bodies were buried. When the dust settled, 114 people were dead. Over 200 were injured. It became one of the deadliest structural collapses in American history, and it didn't happen because of an earthquake or a storm. It happened because of one small design change. Originally, engineers planned to hang both walkways from a single set of support rods anchored to the ceiling. But during construction, that plan was quietly altered. Instead, each walkway got its own set of rods, one hanging from the other. It seemed like a harmless adjustment, until physics stepped in. That change doubled the stress at the critical joints holding the upper walkway. And those joints? They weren't built to handle it. The load became too much. The connections snapped. And with them, so did everything beneath. It wasn't just a tragic accident, it was a devastating lesson in engineering responsibility. One slight change, one overlooked calculation, and over 100 lives were lost in moments. The Hyatt Regency collapse remains a painful reminder that behind every structure, there's a choice between safety and shortcuts. The question is, how many other buildings are one decision away from disaster? It was supposed to be a shining symbol of Shanghai's modern future. Instead, it became one of the most surreal construction disasters the world has ever seen. In 2009, a high-rise in the Lotus Riverside complex didn't crack, explode, or vanish. It simply tipped over, like a fallen tree. One moment it stood tall, the next it was lying on its side, intact but defeated, as if someone had knocked over a toy block. This wasn't the result of an earthquake or any natural disaster. The sky was clear. The ground was still. But beneath the surface, something had gone terribly wrong. It all started with the construction of an underground parking garage beneath the building. To make space, crews removed massive amounts of soil that was already unstable. Piece by piece, they unknowingly pulled away the earth holding the building upright. And then came the rain. Heavy storms drenched the exposed ground, turning it into a soft, shifting mass. The foundation couldn't handle the pressure. Slowly, the structure began to lean, until gravity took over. The entire building toppled sideways, but didn't collapse into rubble. It remained almost eerily whole, a ghostly reminder of what should have never happened. Photos of the fallen tower shocked the world. This wasn't just a construction failure, it was a warning. A warning that rapid urban expansion comes with real risks. That shortcuts in design, rushed excavation, and ignoring ground stability can turn luxury dreams into engineering nightmares. In a city racing toward the future, the Lotus Riverside collapse was a hard reminder of what happens when we forget the ground we're building on. Are we learning from these mistakes, or just waiting for the next fall? It was meant to be a floating fortress, a towering symbol of Sweden's rising power. Commissioned by King Gustavus Adolphus in 1628, the Vasa warship was built to strike fear into enemies and awe into allies. With dozens of cannons and intricate carvings, it was more than a war machine, it was a statement. Bold, majestic, unstoppable. But on its maiden voyage, just minutes after leaving Stockholm's harbor, the unthinkable happened. The Vasa tilted, then tipped, and then vanished beneath the waves, all within 1,300 meters of launch. No enemy fire. No storm. Just silence, followed by chaos. Dozens of sailors went down with the ship. And one of the grandest vessels ever built became one of history's most embarrassing failures. So, what went wrong? At its core, the Vasa was doomed by a simple design flaw. It was too top-heavy. The ship's upper decks were overloaded with cannons and decorative features, while its lower hull lacked enough ballast to stabilize the weight. Even a moderate gust of wind was enough to push the ship past its tipping point. The signs were there, but ignored. Engineers and officials, eager to please the king, focused on size, firepower, and glory, not balance, structure, or safety. And the price for that ambition was paid almost instantly. For over 300 years, the wreck lay hidden beneath Stockholm's waters, a sunken relic of pride gone unchecked. But in 1961, the Vasa was raised, remarkably intact, and placed on display for the world to see. Not as a monument of victory, but as a warning. A warning that no amount of power or beauty can defy physics. That ignoring basic engineering for the sake of grandeur can turn a nation's pride into its most haunting lesson. It was supposed to be a triumph of modern engineering, a massive wall of earth and rock built to tame nature and serve the people of Idaho. The Teton Dam, completed in the 1970s, promised flood control, irrigation, and a stable water supply for the region. Built with compacted layers of soil and stone, it stood tall and confident, a symbol of progress in the American West. But on June 5, 1976, that symbol shattered. It started quietly. As the reservoir behind the dam reached full capacity for the first time, small leaks began to appear. Nothing too alarming, at first. Crews rushed to patch them, believing the situation was under control. But the water kept seeping. The dam kept weakening. And by the time anyone realized how bad it was already too late. The dam broke open in a violent roar, releasing over 250,000 acre-feet of water in a matter of hours. A wall of destruction rushed downstream, swallowing everything in its path. The towns of Wilford and Rexburg were hit hardest. Homes ripped from their foundations. Roads, farms, bridges, gone. The flood killed 11 people, left thousands homeless, and caused billions in damage. And it all could have been prevented. The core failure lay deep within the dam itself. It had been built with porous volcanic rock, material that allowed water to seep through unnoticed. Over time, that hidden flow carved paths through the dam's structure, undermining its stability from within. Add to that a lack of proper oversight and rushed construction practices, and the result was inevitable. The Teton Dam was meant to protect. Instead, it became a haunting reminder of what happens when ambition outpaces caution. A structure built to hold nature back, undone by water quietly slipping through the cracks. Sometimes, the most devastating failures aren't sudden. They're silent. Until they're not. It was once the shimmering heart of Berlin's Radisson Blu Hotel, a towering, liquid column filled with life. The Aquadome. An 82-foot-tall masterpiece of engineering, wrapped in clear acrylic and teeming with 1,500 tropical fish. Visitors rode in elevators straight through its core, surrounded by a living, swirling ocean. It wasn't just an aquarium, it was a wonder. A symbol of modern design. A snapshot of nature suspended in glass. But in December 2022, that wonder turned into catastrophe. Without warning, the massive tank exploded. Millions of liters of water surged through the hotel lobby, smashing walls, flooding streets, and leaving behind a scene of chaos and destruction. Fish were flung across the floor. Entire sections of the hotel were left in ruins. And the cause? Not terrorism. Not an earthquake. Not sabotage. Just time, and cracks too small to see. The tank's acrylic walls had slowly developed microfractures, tiny weaknesses born from years of pressure, subtle temperature shifts, and the relentless weight of the water. No alarms. No warning signs. But beneath the surface, the damage was building. Until one day, the material gave out, and the entire tank failed in an instant. The collapse didn't just take the lives of hundreds of fish. It caused millions in damage and exposed a deeper fear that even the most beautiful designs can hide fatal flaws. The Aquadome was a technological marvel, but in the end, it became a lesson in how ambition must be matched with caution. Because when you're building something that defies nature, you have to ask, how long before nature takes it back? It was meant to be a crown jewel in New Orleans skyline, a sleek new Hard Rock hotel with rooftop views, luxury finishes, and bold ambition. Construction began in 2018, and as the opening date approached, anticipation soared. But on the morning of October 12, 2019, excitement turned to horror. Without warning, the upper floors of the building collapsed. A roar of twisting steel and shattering concrete echoed through downtown. 3 workers were killed. Dozens more scrambled for their lives amid falling debris. Dust and chaos swallowed the site as the unthinkable unfolded in real time. And the cause? A devastating mix of design risk and cost-cutting. At the heart of the failure were steel beams on the 16th and 17th floors, beams that had been intentionally thinned to allow for higher ceilings. But thinner meant weaker. And those beams, never built to hold such massive weight, buckled under pressure. As the structure rose, the load above became too much. The beams gave way, and everything came crashing down. But the problems didn't end there. Investigators soon uncovered deeper flaws, lax oversight, safety shortcuts, and warnings ignored. Some workers had even voiced concerns before the collapse. But in the rush to save money and meet deadlines, corners were cut, and risks were buried. The collapse didn't just destroy a building. It exposed a dangerous truth in modern construction: when profit outranks safety, lives are put on the line. The Hard Rock disaster became a wake-up call, forcing cities, contractors, and regulators to re-examine what's really holding our buildings up. Because a structure can rise fast, shine bright, and still be one beam away from tragedy. In the heart of Seoul, a shining symbol of South Korea's booming economy stood tall, the Sampoong department store. Opened in the late 1980s, it was a glittering 5-story retail paradise meant to showcase wealth, ambition, and the country's meteoric rise. But behind the polished walls and luxury storefronts, a hidden danger was growing. Because the Sampoong building wasn't supposed to be a department store at all. It was originally designed as a 4-story office block. But mid-construction, that plan was scrapped. The developers wanted more space, more floors, more profit. So, the structure was modified on the fly. A 5th floor was added. Support columns were removed to make room for escalators and open areas. And a massive air conditioning unit was placed on the roof, pushing weight far beyond what the foundation was meant to carry. Cracks started to form. Floors began to shift. The building groaned under its own weight. And yet, the signs were ignored. Warnings were silenced. Repairs were avoided. Business continued as usual. Until June 29, 1995. Without warning, the entire structure gave way. Floor by floor, the building collapsed in a crushing wave of concrete and steel. Over 500 lives were lost. Nearly 1,000 more were injured. In seconds, a monument to success became a graveyard of greed. Investigations uncovered a chilling truth. The disaster wasn't just an accident, it was the direct result of corner cutting, corruption, and a blatant disregard for safety. The pursuit of profit had overridden the principles of engineering. And innocent people paid the price. The collapse of the Sampung department store became one of the deadliest peacetime building disasters in history. A tragic reminder that when structural integrity is sacrificed for speed or savings, collapse isn't a question of if, it's only a matter of when. It was meant to be a symbol of elegance, Chicago's Aon Center, once the tallest building in the city, wrapped from top to bottom in pristine Italian Carrara marble. Completed in 1973, the skyscraper gleamed like a monument to modern luxury. But beneath the beauty, a quiet disaster was unfolding. Within just a year, cracks began to appear. Chicago's weather, with its brutal winters and scorching summers, put the marble under relentless stress. The slabs expanded and contracted with every temperature swing. And Carrara marble, while beautiful, wasn't built for that kind of punishment. Soon, pieces of the facade began to loosen. And then, they started to fall. Some panels, weighing over 300 pounds, crashed to the ground below, turning a marvel of design into a hazard for anyone walking near it. Attempts were made to reinforce the stone, but the damage was already too deep. By the 1990s, engineers faced the hard truth: the entire exterior had to be replaced. Carrara marble was ripped away, and stronger, weather-resistant Mount Airy granite took its place. The fix cost $80 million, more than half the original price of the entire building. The Aon Center's marble crisis became a cautionary tale in architectural history. It taught the world that even the most luxurious materials can fail if they're not built for the environment they're placed in. That no matter how beautiful a building looks, strength and safety must come first. Because when form ignores function, even a masterpiece can crumble. It was designed to stand out, a bold, curving skyscraper rising above London's financial district. The 20 Fenchurch Street Tower, better known as the Walkie-Talkie, wasn't just another glass building. Its unique concave shape gave it character, made it iconic. But in 2014, that same design turned it into something else entirely, a solar weapon. Because what no one anticipated was how the building's glass facade would interact with the sun. The curved surface worked like a giant magnifying glass, concentrating sunlight into powerful beams aimed directly at the street below. It didn't just warm things up, it cooked them. The reflected rays melted parts of a parked Jaguar. Shop signs began to warp. Tiles cracked. The pavement sizzled under temperatures reaching a scorching 204 degrees Fahrenheit. On a normal London day, it suddenly felt like standing in front of an open oven. People tried to walk through the area, but couldn't. The glare was blinding. The heat, unbearable. The media gave it a new name, the Skyscraper. The architects were stunned. The public was furious. And emergency fixes had to be rushed in. Special sunshades were installed to scatter the light, deflecting the heat away from the ground. But the damage was already done. What was meant to be a masterpiece of modern architecture had become a lesson in unintended consequences. A reminder that a beautiful design on paper can behave very differently in the real world. And when physics meets ambition, even a harmless-looking building can burn. Sometimes, the most dangerous flaw isn't in what we build, but in what we fail to see.